Welcome to J Sports. I'm your host, Show Chap. Detroit Red Wings have drafted Carter Bear with a 13th overall pick. And look, a lot of people are going to come out and they're going to say, I didn't like Carter Bear. I wanted a guy like Eklund, or I wanted a guy like Rashensky, Atchison. There was many people that had the prevailing thought about the player that they wanted. And it's all conjecture. I mean, everyone has their specific tools that they look for, specific skill sets they look for. And we're not all right. Obviously, when you talk about drafting NHL players, they're not going to be there for a couple years, usually, unless you get the first overall pick, or like a top three pick. They're usually not going to be there for a couple years. So that's what you got to understand about hockey and drafting. I think a lot of us know that are Red Wing fans. We've seen the grind. I mean, even some of the first round picks that Detroit has drafted recently, it's taken them a couple years, and especially when you're a goalie, it's even worse. That's what the coast is going with, and I think Augustine's going to have an easier time transitioning to the next level because the college game, in my opinion, is way better. So when I look at Steve Yzerman drafting Carter Bear, from the WHL. This kid, what you got to understand about Carter Bear is this. These were his stats last year. He's 6 foot 179. Has a high compete level, left wing, 56 games, 40 goals, 42 assists, 77 penalty minutes, 14 power play goals. And when you looked at elite prospects, what they had to say, they ranked him gave him an A. They gave his skating a 5.0, but we know that's something that he's going to have to get better at. Shooting 5.5, passing 7, handling 5.5, speed 7, his physicality is a 7. And then you see what they say on the screen. They say, perhaps the most intense competitor in the draft. He's fearless, physical, and always making something happen. And he's one of the top playmakers available, too. And, when we go back to what I said earlier in the video, we all have our what we're looking for in a player. We all have that. Um, but I always tell people, like, you don't know these players. Like, you truly don't know these players. Like, think about it like this. To get a good understanding of a player at any level, the college game, the WHL, the OHL, the Swedish Elite Hockey League, you gotta watch them. And a lot of people, they look at the highlights, they say, "Oh, this kid's gonna be good." I mean, it's like when a couple years ago, I took a fascination with Dmitry Buchenikov, the kid that the Red Wings drafted in the second round. He looks like he's gonna be a good player, but you got to go watch these guys and how they compete and everything like that. And when I watched, Nygaard last year, I go, this kid's going to be really, really talented, man. When I went back and, a couple years ago was Marco Casper, I was like, this kid's going to be really good. He's gonna hit the next level and keep going on. Carter Bear is the same way. And I talked to someone who actually does know the WHL. He does know Carter Bear very, very well. He covered him in British Columbia with WHL. He was covering the WHL for a newspaper out there, and he said like this: if you want a really good comparison to Carter Bear, it's going to be Zach Hyman. Like, your upside would be a Zach Hyman, your middle tier would be a Travis Konechny, and then your lower tier would be like a guy like I forget the guy he mentioned, but Travis Konechny and Zach Hyman are the ones that came A to A. Okay, so is he going to be a superstar? No. Um, is he going to be a guy who's going to be on your roster in a couple years? Maybe. He's obviously coming off an Achilles injury too. We know that he has to fix his skating, and that could be fixed really easily. I mean, we hear stories all the time of all these NHL pros um, going to a skating camp or doing something along those lines, and they get better skating wise. One of the great stories was Darren McCarty. Darren McCarty, he wasn't a great skater, and he got skating lessons, and he got, he figured out his game, and it really helped him out. So that's exactly what you look for in these NHL players. But if Carter Bear is a guy like a Zach Hyman, if he's a guy like a Travis Konecny, I'll take it every day of the week. In a draft that's not that talented in terms of the upper echelon talent, like Jack Nesbitt, the kid that went to the Philadelphia Flyers. I like Jack Nesbitt. I think he's a big, sizable center. He is a projected third line center. So if a guy like Carter Bear can be a guy who could potentially be a Zach Hyman, a Travis Konecny, a guy that's he's a tough player to play against, and he plays a role on a championship team. That's what you look for, you know. And we came into this draft, and everyone was saying that there was going to be fireworks. It was going to be explosive. There was going to be a lot of trades. We haven't seen a lot of trades in this draft thus far. But what we can say is this has been when I did the video yesterday about the mock drafts, a lot of the mock drafts had it mocked that Detroit was going to select Carter Bear. And this is abnormal because usually Stevie Y, he goes against the grain, okay? So here you had ESPN in the black. They selected Carter Bear. NHL.com selected Carter Bear, one selected Victor Eklund, and then Sam Constantino of Sportsnet, he selected Carter Bear. And he says the options are open for Steve Yzerman here. Bear's Achilles setback is not nothing, but at best, Bear hunts pucks, is difficult to play against, and he's efficient again, making good on his chances. And when we talk about Zach Hyman, that's a guy who's efficient on his chances. Travis Konecny, a guy who's efficient on his chances. If Carter Bear is anything like Zach Hyman, you won. You totally won. And I'm sure, Eisman's done a damn good job drafting. His pro scouting has been a little bit suspect, but uh, this has been a very, very easy transition. When Eisman makes a pick at 13, I mean, it's Carter Bear. Like I kind of trust what he's doing. He drafted Pelika, and Pelika was what, like an 18th overall pick last year. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a lot of people are going to say that they know, like, oh, we should have drafted this guy. We should have drafted this guy. Unless you've watched these teams, unless you've watched, you know, I talked to the guy I was talking to who covers the WHL. He says to get to know some of these players, you have to watch 10 to 12 games. 10 to 12 games. Because in one game they might be hot because it might be someone that they know is in the crowd and they play pretty well. But 10 to 12 games, you really get a gauge of what these players are. And I'm pretty sure Yzerman and Straper and all the scouting staff, they they did their homework on Carter Bear. They did their homework on Victor Eklund. They did their homework on Rashensky. They did their on Carbonneau. They did their homework on Atkinson. When you see what Yzerman has done in the draft, it's been pretty special because he's actually drafted quite well. So when you hear Carter Bear being mentioned with a guy like Zach Hyman and Travis Konecny, that's a total win. And if the Red Wings can get better in terms of their physicality, being tougher to play against in free agency, when you get to the years when Carter Bear is going to come up here, that's when you will see a bigger, like you'll start to be the Florida Panthers. Like you want to be tough to play against. You want tough players on your team, and I know a lot of people wanted Victor Eklund. I was a Victor Eklund guy too. But let me just tell you this. Well, the one thing the Red Wings really need to improve on is being tougher to play against. And it starts with free agency this year because this is your current team. Obviously, a guy like Carter Bear is not going to be on the roster for a couple years. So it's up to Yzerman to make this team tougher to play against because they are not tough to play against. And this draft pick of Carter Bear is a proof that, we've been drafting a lot of the guys like um, Marco Casper, Danielson. I mean, they're good two-way forwards, right? But you want guys who are tough to play against. Anybody you talk to, Carter Bear is just a total dog on the ice. He hunts for pucks. He's a good player. And when you get compared to Zach Hyman, okay, we've watched a lot of Zach Hyman. For if you're a Michigan Wolverine hockey fan, you watch a lot of Zach Hyman. If you are or Oiler fan or a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, you've watched a lot of Zach Hyman, and Zach Hyman has gotten a lot better. Now, all granted, he does play with the best player in the world in Connor McDavid, but he still makes the best of his chances. He's efficient on his chances, and that's exactly what you want out of Carter Bear. So it starts now. Um, this pick of Carter Bear is a proof that Steve Yzerman is trying to make this team tougher to play against, and he's got a job to do, especially in free agency and going into trades and doing all that stuff. He's got to make this team tougher to play against, and I think the draft pick of Carter Bear shows that. Like they gotta get tougher to play against. A lot of people talk about you know Rasmussen not using his size. When you talk about the Red Wings at one point last year, if I went back and I looked at the mid-year point, they were getting out hit 2-1. So, when Todd McLennan took over, they started to have a identity to attack the puck, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting time for the Red Wings, obviously, for the free agency portion of this whole thing, but for the rest of the draft too, because what is something that Yzerman is looking for? In past drafts, we've seen Yzerman go out and get some skill guys, get some goalies, get some defensemen. You know, Augustine, Bolchenikov, Dylan James, Brett Savage. There's been a lot of great players that he has really drafted, and I think that they're going to be putting. But if there was one thing I could ask from Stevie Y, and I think this is not a, a huge ask, but the Tampa Bay Lightning are not going to sign Isaac Howard. So I would love to see if they can go out and make a trade for Isaac Howard. Give up a second round pick, give up your third round pick that you got your other third round pick you got in one of them, and just try to get Isaac Howard. And because he's not signing with Tampa Bay, and they're not happy with him, and I'm pretty sure they would take that. And if I was Yzerman, maybe you dangle Tarasenko in the deal and try to get something going, because they're not going to sign Isaac Howard, and I would try to make a deal with that. So we'll see what happens with the rest of the draft. Obviously, the draft is still going on. If the Red Wings pick another draft pick, we will be posting another video here. But the Red Wings have drafted Carter Bear, the left wing of the WHL for Everett. 56 games, 40 goals, 42 assists. He's got to improve on his skating, but all in all, I think that Carter Bear was the right pick for the Detroit Red Wings at the 13th overall pick. We saw there wasn't a lot of trades, so it is what it is, and we will see you guys in the next video as we talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey here on the JC Sports YouTube page. Thank you for watching, and subscribe, like, comment. I didn't do a good job commenting back to you guys, but I will get all the comments tonight. So I'll see you guys in the next video as we talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey here on JC Sports.